Is 2024 finally the year that Metroid fans have been waiting for? Let's talk about it. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Botox Games, and today I want to talk about Metroid Prime 4, but also the Metroid series as a whole, and whether or not 2024 is finally the year we've been waiting for. So there are a couple different things I want to touch on and talk about in this video, starting with Metroid Prime 4, because that is the only known quantity we have for a Metroid game potentially releasing this year. So Metroid Prime 4 was announced back in 2017 during the E3 Nintendo Spotlight, and every rumor at the time was suggesting that Bandai Namco was in charge of development. Well, in early 2019, almost exactly 5 years ago when I'm making this video, they released that video announcing that they are restarting development and Retro Studios would be taking over, the original developers of the Metroid Prime original trilogy. And the last time that we heard any official mention of Metroid Prime 4 from Nintendo itself was during E3 2021, where when they announced Metroid Dread, they said that development of the game was progressing smoothly. Now that was almost 3 years ago when I'm recording this video, and yeah, it was 5 years ago that they restarted development. So 5 years in most cases is more than enough time to make a AAA game, especially Nintendo, which usually makes smaller games. Now, I would imagine Metroid Prime 4 is probably the biggest budget Nintendo game ever made, maybe only next to Tears of the Kingdom and maybe Breath of the Wild. But even still, I feel like 5 years is enough time for Metroid Prime 4 to be ready. Now, the question is it actually going to release this year? Because as we've seen, Nintendo isn't shy to holding games back for specific parts of the year just to pad out their release calendar. I think a big question for a lot of people is whether or not this game is still even coming to the Switch 1, if it's going to be a Switch 2 exclusive, maybe even a launch title for that console, or if it'll be cross-gen on both platforms. Well, my personal stance on it is that no matter what, this game will release for the Nintendo Switch. It was announced for Nintendo Switch in the year that the Switch came out. I feel like kind of similar to when Nintendo released Breath of the Wild on the Wii U, you know, they didn't need to do that. People would have been salty, but at the end of the day, they really didn't need to release Breath of the Wild on the Wii U. Of course, it still sold like 2 or 3 million copies there, so why wouldn't they? So I feel like for Metroid Prime 4, although it'll be a very, cutting-edge game, probably the best-looking Switch game we've ever seen from first-party Nintendo, I still think it has to release on Switch 1. Even if it does come to Switch 2, a Switch 1 release is mandatory, in my opinion. But to be honest, I would go as far as to say I don't think this game is going to be saved for the Switch 2. There are multiple reasons for this, mainly being I feel like the game is ready this year in 2024, and I don't think the Switch 2 is coming out this year. If you've watched my videos, you probably are familiar with what I think. I think it's coming out in March 2025, replicating the launch timing of the Nintendo Switch back in 2017. So they could wait for Metroid Prime 4 and release it in 2025 alongside the Switch 2, have it be cross-gen, released on Switch 1 and Switch 2. It could even be pushed even later. I mean, I'm kind of working under the assumption the game is essentially done, maybe in the polishing stage, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe there was development troubles for a couple of those first years when Retro Studios took over. It's also worth noting that while Retro Studios has just under 200 employees, they also did have a team working on Metroid Prime Remastered there for at least a couple of years. So maybe Prime 4 isn't quite ready for 2024, but I would say at the latest we will see this game before June of 2025, so in that window. I am still leaning towards a 2024 Switch 1 only release, and if they really want to please the hardcore Metroid fans, maybe it gets a patch that makes it look even better on Switch 2, although I don't think Nintendo's really going to bother doing patches like a lot of people seem to think. I also don't think Prime 4 would be the launch title for the Switch 2. I would love to see them try to catapult Metroid to the levels of success that Breath of the Wild brought the Zelda franchise. Zelda was always popular, Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess sold extremely well, but outside of those two examples and maybe Link to the Past, right, most Zelda games didn't really go crazy, right? They sold well, but not that well in comparison to a lot of other Nintendo franchises. I mean, just look at Skyward Sword, a game that released on the Wii with an install base of 100 million. I understand software wasn't selling at that point, but that game sold about as much as Metroid Dread. So while I would like them to kind of position Metroid Prime 4 and have the confidence in it to be the Switch 2's launch title, I don't think Metroid Prime is at that point where it can carry the launch lineup. And I don't think they would launch it alongside another staple Nintendo franchise like 3D Mario, which I do think will be the launch title. I feel like releasing 3D Mario and Metroid Prime 4 on the same day, there's not much benefit to doing that. At that point, just release Metroid Prime 4 like a month or two later. But for the sake of speculation and in the spirit of being a little bit more optimistic in terms of when we will actually see this game and see it released, I think it'll be shown probably not until the June Direct, right? June E3 time season this year, 2024. And I think it will release in October. put it in that exact Metroid Dread slot from 2021, and that'll be one of multiple big holiday games for the Switch 1's final holiday season on the market. They could show it in the February Direct, just in a few weeks here, but I feel like, I don't know, recently with Metroid games, at least with the two we've had, Metroid Samus Returns and Metroid Dread, they've announced them at E3 and released them 3 or 4 months later. So I think for Metroid Prime 4, they will likely adopt a similar kind of marketing strategy, although because it is a much bigger game, they might want to show it off a little bit earlier in the year, so show it off in February and release it in October. That is what I want to see happen here. But what else could we see from the Metroid series in 2024? Well, in my 10 predictions for Nintendo's 2024 video, I made a very bold claim, and I said that there will be no fewer than 3 Metroid games released in 2024, and I actually do believe that, because I think that before Prime 4 comes out, they have to release Prime 2 and 3. These will not be full remasters or even borderline remakes like Metroid Prime Remastered was in 2023. These will probably be pretty bare bones ports, emulation dumps, whatever you want to call it, like Pikmin 1 and 2 were on the Switch last year. There were so many rumors for so many years about Metroid Prime Trilogy coming to the Switch. I think at some point that probably was the plan, right? I think there probably was a Metroid Prime Trilogy kind of in development, maybe even finished for the Switch. At some point they decided to just do Metroid Prime Remastered. Now, I don't think Retro has the resources to go that crazy on Prime 2 and 3. Unfortunately, that'd be the best case scenario if they surprise us with a full remake / remaster of 2 and 3 at the same time before Prime 4. But I don't think that's going to happen. What I think will happen is we will get pretty bare bones ports. Maybe they shadow drop them in February. Next month, we see a shadow drop of this game or these games on the eShop, and then we see a physical release a few months later, like we saw with Metroid Prime Remastered, like we saw with Pikmin 1 and 2 HD. I think we need to see Metroid Prime 2 and 3 come to Switch before we see Prime 4. Or maybe they bundle all those things together in one big, like, block of the Nintendo Direct. Like, hey, here's the Metroid Prime 4 trailer, but also available today on the eShop is Prime 2 and 3. I think that'd be really exciting, and it would just be so cool to have all 4 Metroid Prime games on one platform. Maybe they'll even go crazy and give us Prime Hunters and Prime Pinball. And Prime Federation Force. Jokes aside though, there is one more possibility I want to discuss in this video, and that is the scenario in which Prime 4 does not make it. If Prime 4 doesn't make it in 2024, I actually still think there's a chance we get a different Metroid game in the holiday slot, in that October timeframe, like Metroid Dread was in 2021. I know that might sound kind of crazy, but if you look at the calendar, it's easy to forget. By October 2024, it'll have been 3 years since Metroid Dread came out, which in my opinion, considering Dread took 4 years of development time, if they want to release a lot of ports and remakes this year to pad out the Switch's final full year on the market as its own console, a great way to do that would be a port or a remake of another 2D Metroid game. Now, maybe that's a port of Samus Returns. Mercury Steam is already very intimate and familiar with that game. Maybe that's a full remake of Metroid Fusion. Maybe it's a remake of Super Metroid. I'm not sure, but 3 years, you know, if they want to do a lot of ports and remakes this year to pad out the schedule, a remake or a port of a 2D Metroid game from Mercury Steam honestly makes a lot of sense. Now, I think for a lot of people, the ideal scenario is we get Metroid Prime 4 this year in October, right? Around that time frame. And then in 2025, we get a whole nother new 2D Metroid game from Mercury Steam. But of course, I'm working under the assumption that they started working on another Metroid game immediately following Dread, which is what they did with Samus Returns. So I don't think it's that far-fetched, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe Mercury Steam is doing a bunch of other stuff. I mean, we know they're working on other games, but I would like to think they're already working on the next Metroid game. So potentially, here's what could happen. We get Prime 2 and 3 in February, right? Shadow dropped in the eShop, and then physical releases maybe in April or something. Then we see a 2D Metroid port or remake, be that Samus Returns or Fusion, in October. And then we see Metroid Prime 4, like, let's say if the Switch 2 releases in March, like I said, I don't think it'll be a launch title for that. Maybe Prime 4 releases in May. So we're talking about, 14 months where we get like 4 Metroid games. That might sound crazy, but considering 2 of them will be GameCube / Wii ports, one of them would be a remake or a remaster port, and then the other one would be Prime 4. We're really only talking one new game, like fully from the ground up new game. So it isn't that crazy, I feel like. But maybe I'm just setting myself up for disappointment. Maybe Prime 2 and 3 doesn't happen. Maybe Prime 4 is still years away somehow, and maybe Mercury Steam isn't even making a Metroid game. I think all of those things are very unlikely to be the case, but maybe that could happen. Realistically, though, grounding myself back in reality, I think Prime 2 and 3 are pretty likely, and I think Prime 4 would probably be the next game after that. Mercury Steam, that's a curveball that I'm throwing in here, but I don't know, I feel like the time might be right for something from them. So with all that said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm going to ask you a couple questions here to fill out in the comment section. So question number 1, do you think Metroid Prime 2 and 3 are happening? And if so, when do you think they will release? Do you think Metroid Prime 4 is coming in 2024 or 2025? And then finally, do you think there's actually a chance we see a 2D Metroid game from Mercury Steam within the next 12 months? I would love to get a conversation going down in the comments below, so please answer those questions. And until next time, folks, of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch news, reviews, coverage, all of that stuff. Follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames, and join the Discord that is linked down in the description. Until next time, peace!